beg to that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Pippa Hearlings.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity today to address this critical issue that impacts so many families and carers, not just in my constituency, but all across the country. I rise today to speak up for all those who feel they're not being heard, to speak about the crisis in the provision of special educational needs and disability support, in particular for children and young people with autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. A crisis that is failing children and young people, their families and carers, and the professionals that support them, and society as a whole. Before I proceed, I would like to thank all the courageous parents and carers who have taken the time to tell me their stories. And some of them have come to Westminster today to be with us in the gallery. And I also want to pay a special tribute to the staff from schools in my constituency, including Bassingbourn, Melbourne and Hawkeston primary schools, who've also taken the time to attend this critically important debate and are also in the gallery with us today. I was privileged to meet some of them last week at Bassingbourn Primary School, where I witnessed firsthand the inspiring work by dedicated and caring professionals, creating safe spaces such as the Hub. I saw for myself the calmness and trusting relations built with those students, heard about the difference this is making whereby students, rather than spiralling into disruptive behaviour or not even being able to make it through the door to registration some days, are now seeking out the Hub as a space to ready themselves for registration or take time out before going back to class. The head teacher, staffs and the SEND coordinators go above and beyond, often making miracles happen on very limited budgets. However, let me share the words of one dedicated professional from my constituency so that this House can hear what the current crisis is lending to. She says, on a daily basis, I'm setting up, delivering, helping other teaching assistants to deliver bespoke curriculums, as these are mostly educated outside the classes of their peers. We don't have a special unit for them. We're just accommodating them as best we can in quieter areas of the school, including corridors, because they're not able to work in the noise and busyness of a primary classroom. The needs of these children vary, though they all need one-on-one teaching assistants to help them and others stay safe, regulated and learning throughout the day. At present, we have 2 non-verbal children with autism diagnosis, who years ago you would not have expected to see in a mainstream school. Up until this week, I've believed I was doing the right thing, trying to make sure they're happy and secure and genuinely learning and making progress with us. However, she's now questioning the very fundamentals of her profession as a result of the heartbreaking experience of those children when they face these key transitions, starting school, primary to secondary, or getting to 18, 20 to 25 and afterwards. So she saw one of those children that she'd been working with, who a few days after starting secondary school was excluded because their behaviour was not manageable. In her words, it broke my heart to hear from her mum what she'd gone through in such a short time in mainstream secondary, and I knew at once she must have been so frightened to have behaved as she did. The child was subsequently at home for most of the remaining school year, receiving education from a tutor paid for by the local authority after her parents demanded it, and then was finally given a place at their local special school in the summer. She says, what I now understand is that the broken system means that a child has to fail in a very distressing way before they're given the provision they need. I could not sit by and see another child I have known for many years go down the same path with all the knowledge of how damaging the experience will be for them without saying something about it.
I'm incredibly grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. The account that she's giving today is incredibly powerful, and I'm really grateful that she's chosen to share it with this House. As somebody who was teaching maths at a secondary school a few months before the general election took place, I can state that the situation she describes, while certainly not unusual, is not universal to all schools. I'm very pleased to report that despite the stresses that were put on schools by the previous government, that we teachers did all we could in secondary education settings to ensure that there was an inclusive education for those with SEND. So would she agree with me that with a change of government, we have seen a change in direction, a change in intention, and hopefully we will see the wins for SEND students that they so desperately deserve?
Yes, thank you. And I thank the Honourable Member. And absolutely, I'm here to pay tribute, as everybody is, to what teachers are doing, both in the failure of the previous government and now currently with the situation. And let's get to what's happening at the moment with the current government, because every child deserves access to education to get the best start in life, to build a strong foundation that can provide valuable skills that allow them to thrive. And it isn't the case for all children across the country, particularly those with autism spectrum disorder and with ADHD. Every professional I've spoken to agrees that early diagnosis and support is essential. I will.
In respect of early diagnosis and onward support, in my constituency of Congleton, we have two very specific problems. One is that although some children are receiving a diagnosis under the right to choose pathway on the NHS, others, often from more deprived backgrounds, are facing considerably longer waits than they would do underneath that pathway, and it very much concerns me, the impact of that on those children. The other thing that's occurring is that Cheshire East Council sometimes goes for periods of time when it closes the EHCP application pathway to new entrants because it's so overwhelmed by the number of applications it already has. So both of these are really serious issues for children in my constituency, and I'd like to thank you for bringing this debate and giving me the opportunity to air them. Would she agree with me that it's a huge improvement that we've got a government that is integrating SEND support, and there's so much more that we are all looking to do?
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member, and I will come on what I think is a postcode lottery. We're seeing these regional disparities in terms of the care and provision that is given, so thank you very much for raising that point. Because the reality is that for many, the wait to get these assessments for the educational health and care plans can mean months, if not years. And Lord Darcy's investigation of the NHS in England notes that waiting lists for community services and mental health have surged, and demand for assessments for ADHD and autism have grown exponentially in recent years, with children disproportionately represented amongst those. Recent research found that there are 200,000 children in England struggling to get an education, health and care plan. That's 200,000 families left in uncertainty, desperate for help, struggling without the support they need. Cambridgeshire currently has 8,033 students with EHCPs. That's a 51% increase in the last 5 years. Of those, 2,593 plans primarily address autism spectrum disorder. And I was told by the Chief Executive of the Cambridgeshire County Council there has been an increase of 270% in the number of children presenting with autism. The requests for EHC needs assessments have risen faster than the national average. Why? We think driven by greater awareness of SEND and the statutory responsibilities of local authorities, the impact of the COVID pandemic, and the overall increase in mental health issues for children even at a very young age. These numbers help to underline the scale of the issue, but we shouldn't get purely drawn into statistics and figures, because behind every number, every percentage, there is a child, a family, a sibling, who are being failed every single day. And I'd like to come on to the issue of disparity that I think the Honourable Member mentioned. So families who can afford to seek private neurodevelopmental assessments tend to receive help much faster than those who are reliant on public services. And for the rest, it's a postcode lottery. NHS England data reveals stark regional disparities in waiting times for diagnosis. For example, the North West region has the longest average wait of 3 years and 4 months from referral to diagnosis. So we've got a health inequality element to this too. Certain groups of children less likely to have their needs identified or met, punished just because of where they live. And for some children, mainstream schools are simply not suitable, and parents and carers are bearing the brunt of this reality, managing reduced timetables, enduring repeated exclusions, and watching their children receive only a few hours of education each day. I will.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady giving way and for bringing this important debate to the House. Following on from her comments about mainstream education, one of my first jobs after leaving university was as a teaching assistant and a year also within a special needs school. Does she agree with me that part of the issues that we are seeing is as a result of, over the last 14 years, a lack of recognition and a lack of appreciation for support staff within mainstream schools and the role that they play in ensuring that every child has a decent education?
I couldn't concur more. What we've seen is over this last decade or more, chronic underinvestment from the Conservative government, despite the fact that statutory needs were recognised. We've seen the identification of that, and that has left us in this situation, which is a pressure point, and we are now seeing the results of that. And what I've been told as well, this is a time bomb. We will see the impacts of this on future, quality of life, opportunities, NHS, and social services, all services really, if we don't deal with this situation. I was also told about the situation particularly for siblings. If you can imagine in a school where the support isn't given that they need, often siblings are drawn out of class. Young carer siblings, and they are being asked to come into the classroom or during their lunch break come and be with their siblings because there isn't the support needed. So this impact is on all of them.
Would the Honourable Lady give way?
Very happily give way.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. And on that point about young carers, I wonder whether she agrees with me that at the moment schools struggle to recognise how many young carers they have on their rolls, and whether she would agree with me that the Department for Education would be wise to look at better ways of measuring the number of young carers and giving schools the toolkits to identify them.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more, and I think the Carers Trust has provided us with these stories and the fact that we really need to have this evidence. And given this situation, it would be easy to point fingers at local councils, say this is their failure. But as we've said, they are stretched to their limits by this chronic lack of funding. And we've heard really that, F40, the cross-party local authority campaign group, has estimated an additional 4.6 billion extra annual send revenue is required to meet current need. Yet most of our county councils face a black hole in their budgets. And one of these crises is, can I just say one thing about, is the training and retention of educational psychologists. Educational psychologists and council workers are overwhelmed, turnover rates are high, and burnout is common. And this is leading to an exacerbation of those waiting lists. I'll give way.
And thank you for allowing me to come in again. I do appreciate it. I wanted to raise the fact that Cheshire has some of the lowest per pupil funding in the country, and I do think that there is a direct link here between schools that receive relatively low levels of funding and councils that have relatively high levels of SEND diagnosis, because there isn't the support in mainstream classrooms that there are when there are higher staffing ratios that you find in areas that have better fundamental funding. And we do need to look at equalising that funding as best we can in the current environment to improve support at an earlier stage, which is what the lady was saying.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to agree, and also my constituency of South Cambridgeshire is the same as yours in that it also has one of the lowest per pupil premiums, which exacerbates the fact that also, even though we have the EHCPs, the Educational Health and Care Plans, most of these are not funded to the amount that's required for each of those students, and so we've compounded the situation that our amazing schools are trying to deal with. If we go back to the issue around educational psychologists and that crisis, Cambridgeshire County Council has 17.5 budgeted educational psychologist roles. 6.4 remain vacant due to a national shortage, and just the fact that actually they get better pay in other jobs in other places. And so, what we're seeing is just the inability to fill those roles and be able to support the team. So finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Liberal Democrats are calling for a national body for SEND to end the postcode lottery faced by families of children with the highest needs. And that would include looking at immediate government action to prioritise early diagnosis and support for those children with SEND, increase the funding for the diagnostic services. I will.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. One of my concerns is that many children end up being out of education because they're not getting the support they need in school. Would you agree that, firstly, it's an outrage that in that situation some parents face the prosecution, but also, would you agree that we need to provide support for children to receive an education, whether that is in school or otherwise, through alternative provision, and that we should record this in a better way? At the moment, we have authorised and unauthorised absences, but we don't record where children are missing school because their parents believe it is because they are not receiving the support they need.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for bringing what is actually, one of the complex issues really around this provision. And whilst we do support the current government's additional allocation of funding to this critical area, we would really want them to look at the fact that this isn't just about mainstream provision. This is also about specialist provision, and as my honourable friend has said, looking at all types of provision, because actually this is complex, and even if they're given support within mainstream schools, this is often on very reduced timetables, and that is meaning that parents and carers are unable to work. And that's what we're finding. They're unable to be productive to society because they are covering the spaces, either for that provision, unauthorised or otherwise, in other settings, or they're just covering for the times when the schools cannot provide that timetabled support. So again, back to what we think we should have. A SEND, national SEND body, urgently increasing the diagnostic services, addressing the chronic lack of educational psychologists, targeted resources to local authorities to improve their capacity, supporting our schools and more special school places, and interim support measures for children awaiting diagnosis so they don't fall through the cracks. And what we've always said as Lib Dems, mental health professionals in every school. It's great to hear your government talk about mental health professionals in secondary schools. We have heard about that need within primary. Let's get in there early too. Yeah. Early diagnosis. The capacity for early diagnosis and management means, as somebody said to me in the words of Desmond Tutu, let's stop pulling people out of the river. Let's stop them falling there in the first place. Once again, I'd like to pay tribute to all the amazing parents and carers that have spoken to me, the amazing teachers, head teachers and SEND coordinators that are working within this. Thank you very much.
Minister Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Honourable Lady ended with the words of Desmond Tutu, and I could not agree more. I absolutely congratulate the member for South Cambridgeshire for securing this incredibly important debate on this incredibly important subject, and for honourable members that have made really valuable contributions to this debate as well. I know as a former teacher, she is really aware of the critical role that education plays in breaking down barriers to opportunity and how vital it is that we get our education and our health services right to support the most vulnerable in our society. She described incredibly eloquently and powerfully the difference that good, inclusive education provision can make, but also the significant challenges there are to providing it, and also in relation to those transition points that many children face that can undermine some of that incredible work that I know teachers are performing up and down the country, as the Honourable Gentleman quite rightly pointed out. I know she, like others here today, will have been inundated with letters and emails from concerned families in her constituency, and I am sure she has been helping them to navigate the incredibly challenging special educational needs and disabilities system, which is why so many of us are faced with this, which is why we need to reform that system. It is a priority for the government. We want all children, regardless of where they are in the country, to receive the right support to succeed in their education and to lead happy, healthy and productive lives. And we know that in far too many cases, we have simply lost the confidence of families that children with special educational needs and disabilities will be supported because they are being failed on every measure. And despite high needs funding for children and young people with very complex special educational needs and disabilities rising to higher and higher levels, the system is simply not delivering. It is not giving the outcomes that those children deserve. So we desperately need to reform the system. So our message to families is that we are committed to improving the SEND system, and we are committed to regaining their confidence. We've published independently commissioned insights. Oh, I will give way.
Minister for giving way, and I completely agree with her comments. Part of making sure that we provide the correct support to the children is making sure that the HCP assessment process is effective. I was told by a charity worker in my constituency of Dewsbury and Batley that 95% of appeals for that concluded SEND support is not needed are successful in Kirklees. So would the Minister agree this is a terrible waste of council resources and that EHCP assessments must be done properly and right first time so that children can be given the support as soon as possible?
I absolutely recognise the challenge the Honourable Gentleman has outlined, but actually it does very much come to the point I was making, which is we have published independently commissioned insights that suggest that the system, if it was extensively improved, the education system as a whole, if we had much better early intervention, which the Honourable Lady has quite rightly referred to, much better resourcing within mainstream schools, it could lead to tens of thousands more children and young people having their needs met without an education, health and care plan, having their needs met within a mainstream system with their peers, without needing a specialist placement. And clearly we need those specialist places for those children with the most complex needs. But to ensure that we have those places, we need to improve inclusivity and expertise within mainstream schools, whilst making sure that those special schools and those places can cater to those children with the most complex needs. The Honourable Lady, I come back to the point that she very powerfully made about transition points for young people and how important it is that the whole system needs to be reformed. It's not good enough to just reform a part of it for that great work to then be undone by the child and or young person moving on to a new education setting that then isn't providing that right support and environment for them. So we really, I guess my point is, this is huge, this is complex. There isn't a magic wand, there isn't an overnight quick fix. But we are determined to change it, and we cannot do it alone. We need to work in partnership to achieve it. I give way.
I'd like to thank the Minister for giving way and for her response. There is so much that could be said about special educational needs across the country and in my constituency of Mid Sussex. The Minister mentioned how we all as members of this place are almost undoubtedly trying our very best to help families navigate through the special educational needs system. I'm really sorry to say that in my experience, some of those families that have come to me, I say, how can I help you? Not you, the family in question. And they have said to me, we don't think you can help us. We just want you to witness and listen to what we're saying because it is so broken. And one particular family, the family of Annabelle in Mid Sussex, who has been out of school for several years, been sectioned, multiple suicide attempts because her autism wasn't being managed in the schooling system. They just want me to bear witness to them, and I'm just so sorry that there's not more that we as parliamentarians can do.
Well, she has borne witness today to that family facing that challenge and that young person, and it is vital that we work together. We work together with parents, with schools, with councils, with the health sector, with expert staff who we know go above and beyond to support children within education settings. So we really do need to work together to achieve these changes that are clearly so desperately needed. The Honourable Member specifically focused the debate today on support for autistic children and young people and those with ADHD. And She will know, I'm sure, from the work that she has undertaken on this, that we are seeing significant increases in the numbers of children and young people identified as autistic or with ADHD, and this is something that we share in common with other countries as well around the world. And we know that families are facing significant challenges and that support needs to be in place, as the Honourable Lady outlined, to make sure that these children can thrive in school. We absolutely recognise the long waiting times across the NHS for autism, ADHD assessments. We are working to address this. But as she also identified, we need to ensure that mainstream schools and colleges can identify these needs early and put in place the support early, because the earlier that child gets the support and the right environment in which to learn, the more chance that they will thrive and that some of the challenges that they may face can be mitigated. So ensuring we have knowledgeable professionals in our schools and colleges is a key part of this. All teachers are teachers of special educational needs and disabilities, but we need to make sure they have the skills and the support to help all pupils succeed. So we are implementing a range of teacher training reforms which begin with initial teacher training. It continues through early career teaching, through to middle and to senior leadership as well. We have the Universal SEND Services contract. It provides SEND-specific courses and professional development for school and college staff. And through this contract, the Autism Education Trust offer a range of training and support for staff on how to support autistic children and young people. The contract began in May 2022. Over 200,000 professionals have received training from the Autism Education Trust and training partners. So on September the 1st, 2024, this government introduced a new mandatory leadership level national professional qualification for SENCOs. We are making the changes. It will take time for these to work through. Our Partnership for Inclusion of Neurodiversity in Schools programme is also running in around 10% of schools, which is approximately 1,600 mainstream primary school settings. It's deploying specialists from both health and education workforces. It's building better teaching and staff capacity to identify the needs of neurodivergent children. It provides opportunities to enhance support and improve outcomes for all children, taking a whole school approach. It's a cross-government programme. It's backed by £30 million of investment, and it's a collaboration between the Department for Health, the Department for Education and NHS England. And additionally, we've just established a neurodivergence task and finish group, bringing together a group of experts from various backgrounds to help us understand how do we improve inclusivity in mainstream schools in a way that works for neurodivergent children and young people. And we know that by listening to children, young people and their families and understanding their experiences, that's a really important part of this work. The group met for the first time this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing their recommendations and the best way that we can support the needs of these children. And this is alongside our expert advisory group on inclusion and the work being done by Dame Kristen Linehan, who is our new strategic advisor on SEND. And we're looking at all of these issues strategically across government as we urgently need to turn around this situation. I could go into the details of high needs funding, but I'm very conscious of time, and I appreciate concerns that have been raised about the national funding formula and appreciate that we prioritise speed over change this year. We needed to get the formula processed and out to schools and education institutions, but we will obviously keep it under review to make sure that the money is being spent in the most effective way to deliver the best outcomes for children. But we've also allocated £740 million for high needs capital funding to support mainstream schools to be able to adapt if needed to create more inclusive mainstream settings. So I want to thank the Honourable Lady again for bringing this matter forward. Ensuring effective support in place for young people is absolutely a priority for this government. We know the hardship far too many families have faced. And my final word goes to all those working in the interests of our children, in our health, in our education and our care systems. We will deliver the best for our children and young people, and I'm confident that together we can achieve this.
Yeah. The question is that this House to now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.